Let me just tell you the game plan of the talk. I want to tell you a fair amount about hummingbirds because they're not only interesting, but they're really quite different than all other birds. They're really very unique. Then I'd like to spend a very little bit of time talking about why you should want to have hummingbirds in your garden. Then I'll talk about some native plants that you can plant that will attract hummingbirds. I'll talk about feeding hummingbirds, the best ways to feed them with an artificial feeder. And then I've got some miscellaneous thoughts at the end. So that's the game plan of what we're going to do. Oh, it never likes to go the first time. Come on. Just always have, there we go. Okay, well, let's start off kind of an overview about hummingbirds. First off, hummers are a family of birds. That would be comparable to saying terns and gulls or doves and pigeons. And there are about 360 species of hummers in that family. All hummingbirds live in the Western Hemisphere. They go from the Arctic Circle way north in Alaska all the way down to the southern tip of South America, but you can't find them if you go to Europe or Africa or Asia, though they have a similar kind of bird there that's not closely related, but looks a lot like a hummer because they have the same way of making their living. Probably the most obvious characteristic about hummers is that they're all very, very small. In fact, the smallest one of all those 360 species lives here in Washington. It's the calliope hummer. It weighs less than 1/10 of an ounce. But all of them are small because even the largest hummingbird weighs about 1 ounce. So very, very small birds. As you can see here, and as you know, I'm sure they feed primarily on nectar. But the key word here is primarily. A lot of people think they only eat nectar. They also eat insects. Especially in breeding season, because they feed their young exclusively on insects. So little mites, little gnats, things like that, spiders. They get them from the nectar. Sometimes you get bugs trapped in nectar or feeding themselves from nectar, and they also catch them as they fly by. They all have very long, slender beaks, as you can see there, that are slightly decurved, some more than others. A really cool thing about them is that they can hover. Now, there are a few other birds that can hover, but no birds can hover like a hummingbird can. They can just hover indefinitely, and they fly like a helicopter. They can go up, they can go down, they can go backwards, they can go forwards, they can go sideways. They're the most maneuverable of all birds. And as you can see by looking at this guy, they basically have no legs and feet. I mean, they're incredibly small. In fact, the Latin name for the family means footless. And so they can't walk. All they do is fly. That's how they make their living. Okay. Well, let's talk about, kind of what makes a hummingbird look like a hummingbird. This is called a sparkling violet ear. It's from South America. And it's to me, it's a really classic hummingbird. First off, it's 4 inches long, which is about the average size of hummers. Again, this very long, needle-like, slightly decurved bill. Look how beautiful it is. I mean, hummingbirds just come in an amazing variety of colors, and they're iridescent, which means they glow. I mean, if you've ever seen one, you know they seem to glow. And the reason they've got this color is because rather than having pigment in their feathers, which is what most birds do, instead, there's oil inside the cells of their feathers that have air bubbles that reflect light. And so what you're seeing actually is light reflecting back at you. What that also means is if there isn't light, if they're in shadow, they often look black. And so sometimes you see a real bright patch of color, and sometimes you see black when you look at them. Let's see. They're very skinny birds. You can see they don't have much of a belly. They've got very long tapered wings. Again, almost legless. You can see there's their little feet dangling down there. And if you were a birder, you would notice that they tend to have rather short tails. So let me tell you some of the cool things about them that make them different than other birds. First off, as I was saying, unusual flight. They can fly in all directions. In fact, the name, the reason they can fly the way they do is severalfold. First off, they beat their wings unbelievably quickly. The average hummingbird beats their wings 50 times a second. One of our hummingbirds in this state beats their wings 90 times a second. And that's why they're called hummingbirds. It's their beating wings that make that humming sound. They really are not very vocal, meaning they don't talk, if you will, or sing or call very much. When they do, it's a little tick sound, like tick, 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 just like that. That's about all they can do. The other reason they can hover, besides that they can beat their wings so fast, is that they fly more like insects than like birds. The average bird puts a lot of strength on the downstroke, which gives them uplift, and they get some uplift from their upstroke of their wing, but not too much. These guys are designed differently, so they get just as much lift on the upstroke and downstroke, plus they can swivel their wings more than any other bird. So that's why they can hover. I was going to show you just a little piece of video where you can hear David Attenborough tell you 56, that's where I wanted to start.
Most birds flap their wings up and down. Flap theirs more like insects. They twist their wings around between strokes and so can generate lift when flapping both forwards and backwards. Doing this at high speed puts a huge strain on their wings.
Okay, I'll stop that there.
So
again, you know, it's one of the many differences between hummers and other birds. Whoops, how am I doing this? Let's see. Get rid of this.
It beats back and forth.
Oh, why aren't I going to the next slide? Let me do this way. There we go. There's the next slide. You know, I grew up in New York City, so I was pretty old before I first saw a hummingbird, and I must admit I flinched. And the reason I flinched was because if you haven't had one buzz by you, you may not appreciate they sound like giant bees. And I thought I was being attacked by, you know, just a humongous bee or wasp. So I just wanted you to hear the sound they made. So like I said, you know, you may, if you think you're being buzzed by a giant bee, there's probably a hummingbird around. There we go. Another truism about hummingbirds is that, you know, they may be little and they may be pretty, but they're actually very, very aggressive compared to most other birds. And they're not only aggressive to other hummingbirds, they will attack and chase birds that are much, much larger than themselves, though they usually don't do any damage. Males claim territories of about 1/4 of an acre. Females tend to stick very close to the nest, but they both protect the nest and the territory. There's a practical hint buried in that statement, which is, though you often see people put lots of hummingbird feeders next to each other or buy feeders that have multiple openings, it's really not only not necessary, it's not a great idea because you're going to get a lot of fighting. You're much better off having single opening feeders spaced far apart than putting lots of them together, because otherwise you're going to, you know, stress them out and they're going to fight. Okay. This is the time of year when you can start seeing courtship. It's been going on for about 3 weeks now. And each species of hummer has a unique courtship ritual, which, you know, if he walks, you can see. I mean, it's hard to miss them if you know what you're looking for. This is actually a calliope hummer, which is common in the eastern half of the state, not so here. Usually what happens is the male sings a little bit, such as it is, to attract the female's attention. And then he does this amazing flying display. And I'll show you this, but they fly very, very high up in the air, like 100 feet or so. And then they rapidly fly almost to the ground and at the last second pull up. So you get sort of a J shape when they do it. They do it over and over again. When they're falling, they go more than 60 miles an hour. Normally hummers fly at about 30 miles an hour, even when they're flying backwards. To give you a sense of how fast 60 miles an hour is for a bird that's a couple of inches long, that's more than 400 times their body length every second. That's how fast they're going. They generate up to a G-force of up to 9G, which is way more than would make a human person black out. It's more than jet fighters can stand. In terms of courtship, the males do a lot of courting because their lifestyle that's called polyamorous. Hummer males impregnate many females and then let me show you just a quick blip of that courtship.
First, he woos her with a song. Now he's got her attention. The stage is set for the greatest example of speed dating in the world. Next, he climbs 30 meters above her. Then for the grand finale, he hurdles straight at the ground. And that was it. Over in a few hundred
So as I
seconds.
said, keep your eye out. They're doing it now. They've been doing it since, what I'd say at least about January 10th. So when you take a walk and there's an open field or a gap in the woods, keep your eye out. You can hear it. It makes that humming noise when they do it. Migration. It may surprise you because one of the real common hummingbirds around here does not migrate. It's here all year round. That is the only hummingbird in the world that doesn't migrate. Hummingbirds migrate. And they're very, just like they're unusual in lots of other ways, they're unusual in how they migrate. First off, they migrate by themselves. And most birds, even if they're normally solitary, migrate in flocks. So that's very unusual. They also migrate during the daylight hours. Virtually all birds, even if they're diurnal, most birds are diurnal, migrate at night. They fly at night and they sleep during the day, but these guys migrate during the day. And they fly very, very low. Most birds, when they migrate, and that's why you don't notice them migrating, except for geese, which don't fly so low, or sometimes don't fly so high. Most birds are flying so high and it's at night that you don't notice them. There are birds that fly higher than jet airplanes go. They fly at about 37,000, 38,000 feet. But these guys fly very, very low. The reason they fly low, and you're going to hear kind of the same theme over and over again, is that they can't go very long without eating. And so they migrate during the day so they can stop and eat, and they fly low so they can find food. So it all makes sense. Our migrants begin arriving in mid-February, generally gone by June, and then they'll come through again in September. So this is a good time to be talking about them. Okay, they have really unique tongues. You know, here's the end of the hummer's beak, and here's its tongue sticking out. So, you know, it's not just their tongue that lets them drink nectar. It's not just their beak that lets them drink nectar. They've got this long tongue, which pretty much doubles the length of their beak. And it's not a straw. Okay, it's not a straw. They don't sip, they don't suck up liquid, and it's not capillary action doing it automatically. Rather, they've got a series of muscles. They can split the tip of their tongue and then they pump it. They pump this open and closed and it forces liquid up. So that's how they can drink so quickly. Another thing to know about hummers, which explains a lot of their behavior, is they have very, very fast metabolisms. The fastest metabolisms of any animal on the planet are hummers. They need this in part because they're so small, so they leak heat like mad. Also, so they can power those wings that are beating, 50 or 60 times per second. Their heart beats an average of 1,200 times per minute, and they breathe 250 times per minute because you need a lot of oxygen to fuel this metabolism. And so hummingbirds have to consume at least half their body weight every day. Some of them like to have twice their body weight in food every day. That's not a lot of food because they're really little, but relatively that's a huge amount. In order to help keep them warm, they've got more feathers per square inch than any other bird by quite a lot. And as evidence of this high metabolism, their normal body temperature when they're awake, it's about 105 degrees. So that's quite a high temperature for a warm-blooded animal. At night, however, you get a different story. They go into a state called torpor. Torpor is like short-term hibernation. Their body temperature drops to about 70 degrees. They're unconscious, really in an incredibly deep sleep. And the reason they do this, they drop their body temperature, is they would starve to death if they went 6 or 7 hours without eating. So this doubles the length of time that they can go without feeding. Again, another kind of subtle message here is that people often say, should you feed hummers? The answer is a rousing yes. There's no such thing as too much food for hummers. And so, yeah, if you're going to feed anything, I always tell when I talk about feeding birds in general, if there's any bird you're going to feed, I would be feeding hummers, especially in cold weather. There aren't a lot of plants around. Now, this may surprise you because they're so small, but birds are much smarter than most people think they are. Many birds are much smarter, but these guys are very smart in certain ways compared to other birds. And I think, again, it has to do with the fact that they need to eat so constantly. So one proof of their smartness is that they can remember, studies have shown, you can design a test to prove this. If you've got, a yard of a half acre and you've got dozens of bushes and, hundreds of flowers, they remember where they've been when, and they won't go back to a flower until enough time has passed for it to refill with nectar. And that's different for different types of flowers, but they keep it all straight, and they very efficiently go to flowers that have just had enough time to fill up again. Another proof that they've got really good, which shows they've got good memories, another proof that they have good memories is that they remember people. They learn to recognize people who change who feed them, who put, liquid in their feeders if you've got feeders out. And they will tell you when the feeder's empty or they want to change. We have a hummingbird female that lives right outside my front door because I've got a feeder there. And when it's getting empty, when I come outside, she ticks at me and buzzes me. And she doesn't do that for my husband because I'm the one who feeds her, not him. So they can recognize people. And that's kind of cool, I think. Well, last thing about hummers proper is I wanted to show you a hummer nest. I mean, note this person's fingernail. Look how little that is. It's like the size of a dime. And look how tiny those eggs are. So you've probably passed by lots of hummer nests and just not noticed them because they're very easy to overlook. But what they're made of soft plant fibers, you can see they're bound together usually with spider silk, spider web, and they'll reuse them year after year, which is why that hummer comes back, because there's a nest in that tree I was talking about. They're usually in foliage but kind of buried in the foliage, especially with foliage above them, because they like to try to keep the rain off. So you're not going to find them at the end of a branch or at the top of a tree. Usually it's pretty buried, and it's often on a branch itself. If you want to encourage hummers, another thing you can do is you can plant cottonwoods and pussy willow, or you can hang out cotton balls, or you can put out lint from your dryer. Anything they can use instead of spider web to bind them will encourage hummers to think about nesting where you live. When are the nests active? Well, Annas are very early breeders. Anna's hummers, like I said, the mating displays started about 3 weeks ago or so. So they're very, very early. They're going to be nesting now. The rufous don't start until April, and they're pretty much done by July. So that's when you're going to find active nests. I just wanted to tell you really quickly that the closest relatives, because I am a bird person, the closest relatives of hummingbirds, which are so different than other birds, would be swifts. This is a Baux's swift, which is the most common swift in our area. You can see some physical similarities. They've got long tapered wings. They've got this very skinny body, and they're basically legless. Again, these guys live entirely on insects. Okay. So that's what I wanted to tell you about hummers. Now I will just kind of pose the question of why would you want to attract them? By the way, this is a Honduran emerald hummer on a banana flower. Well, I mean, if you want to just kind of be pragmatic, why hummers are important around the world is that they are pollinators. This is talk about pollinators. And there are over 5,000 plants around the world that rely solely or exclusively on hummingbirds to pollinate them. And obviously those plants would be in trouble, you know, if it wasn't done. And a lot of those plants are important to people. We eat them. Things like pineapple and avocado and nutmeg are all pollinated by hummers. And they pollinate basically in 2 different ways. When they stick their beaks into the flower, they brush the stamens and pollen rubs off, and then when they go to the next flower, they pollinate it. The other way is that the turbulence from their wings actually generates enough wind that it shakes the pollen loose and it falls from one flower to another. Locally, off the top of my head, the plants that rely on hummers for pollination are hawthorns, redbuds, madrones, red flower and currant, lots of our berry bushes. So, you know, that's one reason to do it, to keep these native plants, you know, healthy and going and content. And the other reason I would say is just frankly, they're beautiful. I mean, very few people don't find hummingbirds beautiful as they fly by. They're so vividly colored, you know, but it's nice to have them in the garden. Well, let's talk about the hummers you can find here. As I said, there's about 360 species globally, about 20 species in the US, 4 species in the Pacific Northwest, 4 species in Washington. There were another 3 that migrate through very quickly, and there are 4 species of hummers in Mason County. However, only 2 of them are common. So there's really only 2 hummers that you're likely to see. And then there are 2 that if you're really lucky, you might see. Those 2 hummers tend to live east of the Cascades rather than west of the Cascades. So the 2 hummers that you're going to see in Mason County, let me start with this guy, a rufous hummingbird. And I learned something I didn't know when I was putting together this talk, which is that in Mason County, rufous hummingbirds are the more common of our 2 hummers. In Thurston County, it's the reverse. These are the less common. So I always thought they were less common, but not in Mason County. This is a male rufous hummingbird. And basically what you're looking for, I can go into more detail, but basically what you're looking for is orange. If you see any orange at all on a local hummingbird, it is a rufous hummingbird. It is the only one that has orange on it. And the males are quite orange. Backs are orange. Most of their chest is orange, though there is a white patch at either end. They have this red iridescent, we call it a gorget, neck piece that sometimes flashes green depending upon the light. So when you see a rufous hummingbird, you're seeing orange and some green more than anything. So there you can go. There's its orange back. And there is its gorget flashing green. You can also see there's a little bit of green on top of his head. These are slightly smaller than our other hummer. So if you get good at noticing size, you'd notice this is a little guy. Here's the female. The female is also green and orange, but she's got a lot more green and a lot less orange. Mostly you're seeing orange in her rump and tail, and she has a black tipped tail. I'll give you another view of her. There's a female from underneath. She's got a pure white belly. She doesn't have much orange on her belly, though she's got some orange flanks. Again, her back would be green. The only color on her underside are these very densely packed spots that can look black or green depending upon the light. So again, the thing is, if you see, if you see any orange at all, you've got a rufous hummer. If it's a lot of orange, it's a male. If it's not much orange, it's a female. And the only thing I'd say about females is they're slightly larger than their male counterparts. They're actually more efficient flyers, so they eat less food, which is good because the males tend to push them out of the best territories. So it's the way the females keep alive. Okay, here's the other one, the Anna's hummingbird. And this one's here all year round. Okay, so you can find Anna's all year round, and yes, please feed them in the winter. They're here all year round, but they've only been here about 60 to 70 years. They are not really native to here. They used to, for a very long time, they were only in Southern California. And the reason they moved up the coast is because of the plantings people do and because people put out feeders. These guys would definitely starve to death here in the winter if we weren't supplemental feeding them, because they need flowers, and we don't tend to have flowers in December and January. So again, if you care about hummers, yes, you should feed them in the winter. Anyway, this is a male Anna's hummer. It's a little bit bigger than a rufous, like 4¼ inches long, and weighs about as much as a nickel. It tends to have, for a hummer, a relatively short beak. Basically, what you're looking for on the male is a really vivid green with this incredible violet throat. It's also violet up here, but again, remember, things look black depending upon how the light's hitting them. But no orange, no orange, no orange. And here's the female. She is gray on the bottom, and she's green, solid green on the back. Again, no orange. She doesn't tend to have as much black on her tail. She has some spots on her throat, which can look green or black depending upon the light, but not nearly as densely spotted as rufous females are. Then the other two that you just might see, I mean, these are the ones you're going to see. I personally have never seen the other two here in Western Washington, and I bird a lot. But this one here is called a black-chinned hummer. Really what distinguishes it is it's got a bright purple gorget. Again, east of the Cascades. I mean, if you were to go to Clay Elum, you could see them. If you were to go to Yakima, you could see them. And this one, which I showed you before, is the Calliope hummer. Its nickname is bee hummer because it is the smallest hummer in the world. It's only about 2 inches long. And so it's very easy to know that that's what you're looking at, because there is no hummer it's half the size of our other hummers. So there's that. Well, now I'm going to get to the to me, scary part of the talk, because I'm talking to gardeners, and I'm sure you know way more about flowers than I do. But I'd like to tell you what kind of flowers to plant if you want to attract hummers. And my focus is going to be on native plants, because we really believe, Audubon believes, that, we should try to plant as many native plants as we can. I actually have planted 108 species of native plants in my garden, though not all of them have survived. But in general, the flowers that hummers prefer are red or violet, and they're tubular. Okay, that's the quick answer. I have found, though, that they are really not very fussy. If there are red or violet tubular plants around, that's where they'll go. But if there aren't any in your yard, but you have other types of flowers, like a yellow flower, they'll go to that too. So they prefer these, but it's not exclusive. The other shaped flower that they tend to go to are big flat plants, big flat flowers. I'm thinking like a sunflower or something. Okay, they will go to those as well. But your best bet are red or violet tubular plants. Now, this is just a sampling. Oh, by the way, I made a handout, which I don't know if it's available yet, but I made a handout, so you don't have to try to remember any detail here about, kind of some of the best native plants for hummingbirds. Not that there aren't others, but these are the ones that came to mind to me. All right, so let's start here. Penstemon, also called beard tongue. That's native to Washington, and there are 28 different species of beard tongue. A nice thing about them, especially as our climate changes, is they tend to be drought tolerant. You can be a little sloppier about watering them, or if you've got a dry patch in your yard. Depending upon the species, their flowers are pink or lavender or blue. A lot of our native plants have pink and lavender flowers. They like sun. They don't like to keep their feet wet. And these are also good for bees. So, you know, you get double. A lot of these plants do double duty because there are some differences, but a lot of butterflies like the same plants that hummingbirds do because they're also using their long tongues. A second plant that is much less showy is alum root or native coral bells. Now, of course, there are tons and tons and tons of cultivars of coral bells, but there are 3 native species. This is one of them. If it looks a lot like a foam flower, it's because it's very closely related to foam flowers, but they are actually not coral bells. These guys like shade, and you know, in the Pacific Northwest, we're always looking for shade-loving plants, so these will grow in deep shade. They like to be kept moist. I've got a whole bunch on the north side of my house, and another nice thing about them is that deer don't eat them. I tend to have deer problems, so I'm sensitive to that. Another good choice is columbine. Now, there are lots of columbines. Native to Washington is the western columbine, which is what I have there. These are nice plants. They grow about 3 feet tall, and they're really not very fussy. I mean, they've got preferences, but they're not as fussy as some plants are. Full sun is best. They'll grow in partial sun, but they won't flower as much, won't grow as vigorously. They like well-drained soil. They don't like to keep their feet too wet either, but they like soil that has a lot of organic material mixed into it as opposed to, you know, just like sandy or rocky soil that isn't very good. So, you know, using manure or whatever is good for these. The big problem with columbine is that they're very sensitive to high winds, so it's good to put them in a sheltered place. And though they don't like to keep their feet wet, they don't like drought either, so you're going to water them a little bit all the time. One of the absolute best to plant, in my opinion, is bee balm, Monarda. In this state, there are 2 different native Monarda plants. Most people think of this one, you know, the scarlet bee balm, scarlet Monarda, which certainly is native. I actually grow the other one, which is often called wild bergamot or horse mint, which is lavender. It's exactly the same, except it's lavender. I have tons of these in my yard. Full to partial sun, got to keep it moist. They grow really big, 4 feet tall. The big problem with them, and maybe someone can tell me what to do about this so it doesn't happen so much to me, is mine seem to be very subject to powdery mildew. Happens to me all the time. So that's the problem with them, but they're very hardy. They spread wonderfully. They don't need a lot of care once they're established. So bee balm. Olympic harebell. These guys are not just native to this area, they're endemic to this area, meaning that they don't grow anywhere else. I mean, they grow in like this corner of Washington state and they're not native anywhere else. This is a ground cover. I wanted to try to do a variety of plants because it doesn't grow much more than about 4 inches tall. You get these blue-violet flowers. It's very adaptable. You can put it in sun, you can put it in shade. I've got a bunch of these in my yard and very, very carefree. Here's a plant I had never seen until I came here. I'm from the eastern part of the country, called fireweed. I'm sure you've all seen fireweed. Confused me for a long time because I thought to myself, why would you call a pink flower, a magenta flower, fireweed? Shouldn't it be orange or yellow or something? But the reason it's called fireweed, which you probably know because you know more about plants than I do, is because it's one of the first plants to come back after there's been a forest fire, or a brush fire. So that's why they're called fireweed. It's got long-lasting blooms. It grows in sun to partial shade. It can take very shallow soil, rocky soil, not very rich soil. So if you've got an area like that in your yard, you might consider fireweed. Then we've got the native orange honeysuckle, you know, a vine, of course. I find mine do better in sun than they do in shade. In fact, I've got two next to each other and one gets a little more sun than the other and it's really much bigger. And this kind of does double duty as some of the other plants do too, but in the hummingbirds love the flowers, but the rest of the birds love the berries that come after the flowers, nice red fruit. Lupin, so you've got lots of choices, and this isn't all of them. 20 varieties native to Washington. Most are about 1 to 2 feet tall, some are 3 to 4 feet tall. Like fireweed, they're among the first that colonize a disturbed area. They're in the pea family, so they fix nitrogen. Their flowers tend to be purple or lavender, some are pink. Full sun, I'd say, maybe some light shade. Again, don't have to try to remember this. There's a handout, but I just wanted to show you them. Showy milkweed, which is really great for certain butterflies, but it's not the same as common milkweed. This is a different plant. Pink flowers, rather large, grows 1 to 3 feet tall, kind of big leathery leaves. It tolerates drought and poor soils, and actually likes it dry. Trying to give you some variety again. I wanted to at least put one tree up here, so the Pacific Madrone. Believe it or not, because I don't think people think of hummers as going into trees, but they do. This is a lovely tree because its bark is so interesting. It's got red-orange fruit that lots and lots of birds like, but it's also got these white flowers in the spring and summer, and that's what the hummers are going after. And then a bush. Had to do one bush. There are lots of bushes. Actually, I'm doing 2 bushes, but there are tons of bushes I could have done. And I don't know the answer, so don't ask why red elderberry as opposed to blue elderberry. But all the lists you ever see have red elderberry for hummers on them. And again, the berries are very, very useful. It's a shrub that grows, well, can get really, really tall. They like moist to wet soil. They like keeping their feet wet, but they're very tolerant of sun. They grow in the shade, they grow in the sun. And here's what their flowers look like. And that's what the hummers are going after. I think I've got just a few more. Again, I wanted to give you lots of choices to encourage you to grow native plants that hummers would like. So salmonberry, perennial shrub up to about 12 feet tall. A nice thing about salmonberry, which is in the blackberry raspberry family, is that it flowers very early and it produces berries very early. So you're extending the season, you're providing food. They're among the earliest plants to flower that hummingbirds like around here. These and red currants, which I don't have a picture of, tend to flower very early, and the hummers, when they're coming, you know, in February, are going to need some early plants. They can't take full sun. They can take partial sun. They like full shade. That's why I always find them in forests. But salmonberry is a good choice. Now, just a few more. These now aren't native, but they're naturalized. So if you want to just have some more choices, good old foxglove, you know, which originally came from Europe and Northwest Africa, but they're so common here. This is a plant with like a 2-year life cycle, so it only flowers in the 2nd year, comes in lots of colors. So if you want some yellow, which I haven't mentioned a lot, you can plant some foxglove. It likes moist, acidic soil with lots of organic material mixed in. This likes a rich soil, partial shade. And this is what it looks like the first year. It's to my eye, it's rather homely the first year. I probably pulled a lot out before I knew that these were foxglove. And then hummingbird mint, hyssop. Hyssop to me looks like a fuzzy bottle brush. There's several varieties that have naturalized here, though it's not native. It's from the Caspian Sea area. It's got a lot of medicinal uses. People all over the world have used it medicinally. Just don't confuse it with water hyssop, which is an invasive plant. We don't want to grow those. And so just a number of flowers to show you that, you've got a lot of choices if you want to, plant for hummers. So the last topic I want to take up is using feeders to feed hummers, because again, the ones that stay here in the winter, Annas definitely need them. And the first thing I want to tell you is that feeding hummers is not expensive at all. You can buy a feeder like this one, but what's really kind of fun, and if you've got kids or grandkids, this is a really fun project to do. I'm ahead of myself. What you're going to put in your feeder, whether you buy it or you make it, is a homemade sugar solution, which costs almost nothing. It's very easy to make. Basically, it's a 1-to-4 ratio of sugar to water. So a 1/2 cup of sugar for 2 cups of water. You put them on the stove, you let it boil for 2 minutes, let it cool down, and it's ready to go. That's it. So you're not talking about a lot of expensive ingredients. Please do not add dyes. Not good for the birds. Please do not, there's no reason to buy prepared solution. It's got preservatives often, it's got dyes often. Red is not better. You don't need it, and often not good for them. So everyone I know who's serious about this makes their own sugar solution. But what I started to say is you can buy feeders, and some of them are pretty expensive, some of them are inexpensive, but it is really easy to make an unbelievably cheap hummingbird feeder. You can take an old jelly jar and just knock some holes in the lid and hang it, and that's a perfectly fine hummingbird feeder. And you can even paint the top red if you want to be, really try to attract them. You can also take a baby food jar and punch some holes in the top, and if you really want to get fancy, paint it red. And this person added a perch, which is nice but not necessary. Let me tell you, for hummers, they're going to hover, or they're very happy to hover. So you don't need to add a perch, but you can if you want to. Another really inexpensive way to make a hummingbird feeder is to use a soda bottle. The only parts you have to buy then, if you're drinking the soda anyway, is this part here. And I just checked on Amazon, and they're 3 for $12 at Amazon. I'm sure you can get them other places. So, really quite inexpensive. If you don't think that's attractive, and I don't, what you can do is soak off the label and then paint it. You can decorate it in it however you like. A lot of people paint them. And some people get even funkier, and they twist copper wire around it. So you can make them as creative and attractive as you want to, but you're basically starting with either a soda or a wine bottle. And though I don't really like having so many holes in one feeder, to show you, if you don't want to spend $12 on 3 feeding tubes, you can just take an old, whipped cream cheese or margarine plastic container, attach a bottle to it, and put some holes in it, and that's fine too. The hummers are not fussy. I don't like that they dyed this red here, but they did. Now, if you're going to feed hummers, you got to take care of the feeder. And so you need to clean them regularly. If you don't, they get filled with bacteria and you're spreading disease. So you need to clean them. You need to change the sugar water as soon as, as it gets old. And that means at least once a week in the summer. Okay, in the winter, it can go a long time, but in the summer, once a week, maybe twice a week, to change the solution. You want to position the feeder so that it's very visible, but you don't want it to be in direct sunlight. Again, if it's in direct sunlight, it's going to heat up all the more, and then you're going to get faster spoilage. So do yourself a favor and put it in the shade. The hummers are very happy to go to feeders in the shade. Again, don't add anything. Sugar water really is, what you want to do. You're doing this for calories. Remember, they're going to catch some bugs to get the other nutrients that they need. And you want to be sure that you keep, bees really aren't a problem. I shouldn't have put it there so much, but wasps and ants out of it. In terms of how do you clean the feeder, it's very simple. You disassemble it, you drain it, you just use warm soapy water and rinse. It really helps to have a brush, and it really helps to have a bigger brush and a smaller brush. For the smaller brush, a mascara wand works really well, a clean mascara wand. And then a bigger brush so you can really scrub. You just let it dry and you fill it and rehang it. So it's not hard to do. Now, the biggest problem I know that people have with feeders is wasps, especially at the end of the summer when the yellow jackets are out. Wasps can like hummingbird feeders, but there are ways to keep them out of your feeders and off your feeders. First off, plant plants that they like. So they've got alternative food sources, you know, so then they don't, you know, they're not in a food desert. They don't have to go to your feeder. Also, put out an alternative water source, because often the wasps are not really going for the food. They're not going for the sugar in the sugar solution. They're thirsty. So if you have just a, you know, a tray of water out, you know, a little bowl of water, they'll go to that too. This one's funkier, and you got to check that it's alcohol free. But the only thing I would ever add to my sugar solution is alcohol-free almond extract, just a couple of drops. Wasps don't like it then, and it doesn't affect the hummers. The hummers don't care. So if you've got a problem, you can go look for some almond extract. Do not have any yellow on your hummingbird feeder, because the color yellow attracts yellow jackets. So, you know, keep that away. And if you want to, and a lot of commercial feeders have this anyway, you can use what's called a bee guard, even though it's really wasps we care about, not bees. And bee guards just usually look something like this, like little flowers. And it's what it's doing is it's just increasing the distance. Wasps don't have really long tongues. If you, you know, in effect, raise the feeder opening away from where the liquid is, then wasps can't get to it. You can also half fill your feeders. That would do the exact same thing. You don't have to spend any money then to do that, but then you have to fill them more frequently. The other problem people sometimes have is ants coming into their feeders. No one likes to attract ants, so you can use an ant moat. And ant moats, again, you can buy one. This is a bought one. You can make one. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to hang some sort of a bowl and fill it with water. And then your feeder hangs from it. So the feeder's down here. Ants don't fly, except for very few during breeding season. And so the only way they can get to the hummingbird solution is to crawl there, and they drown if they try to, if you use an ant moat. So that will absolutely keep ants out of your feeder. So just some other tips. If you're serious about taking care of the feeders, the hummers that you attract, please avoid pesticides. Remember, the hummers need some bugs, and so you don't want to kill them all, and you also don't want to poison the hummers. So really try to eliminate pesticides. Plant insect pollinated flowers as well as hummingbird pollinated flowers, because again, you want to attract insects to your yard, especially during breeding season. I like this idea. I do it all the time. Hang a piece of overripe fruit near a hummingbird feeder. It attracts fruit flies, and then you can watch them zigzag and fly and eat the fruit flies. And again, they need the protein and the fat. So that's a really good thing. And even though hummers are living, you know, on nectar largely, you think, well, they don't need any water. Otherwise, they're getting all the water they need. But they do like to bathe like all other birds. So a bird bath is a good thing, providing water for bathing. Whew. And that's what I wanted to tell you about hummers. I hope I've inspired you. I hope I've convinced you that it's not hard to do. That if you want to have hummers in your yard, you should be able to have them. Again, please hang feeders, you know, pretty far apart, because hummers generally don't get along well with each other. But you can do it, and I hope you want to. And that's it. I'm done. Stop sharing.
Right. Well, thank you, Kim. And I think we've got some questions for you. We're going to start with right here. Could you say your question?
Yeah, I have two actually.
Okay.
One is in the Northwest, the way the the orifice or whatever is generated, does it not just fill with water all the time and dilute the nectar?
You know, I suppose it's
Just so we can repeat it, Kim, let me just repeat it.
Mhm.
So the question is, does the hummingbird feeder just with all the rainfall, is that it,
Uh-huh.
that it would dilute as water gets into it? So that's our question.
Okay, well, I have to tell you, I've never heard of anybody having that problem. And I mean, it's a logical question. It's a good question. And all I can tell you is I have never, ever heard of anybody who's had that as an issue. I think some of it is, if you've hung them in the shade, they've probably got, tree branches above them, that, it's deflecting most of the water and very little is getting in. Plus, if you do think it's a problem, you can always make very narrow openings because they don't need wide openings, and you're just not going to get a lot of water in there. I just wouldn't worry about it, I guess. But it's a good thought. I've just never heard of any issues.
My second question is squirrels. My squirrels have been eating the orifices. They get on and they swing and then they just drink the nectar.
Oh, that's
Just
terrible.
so everybody on Zoom can hear it. So a problem with squirrels getting into hummingbird feeders and chewing on the orifices.
Well, there are two things you can do. You can try your classic squirrel guard, which looks like an inverted bowl that you hang above the feeder. You do this for any kind of feeder, and that usually keeps squirrels off. If it doesn't, you can buy, I'll call it a squirrel cage, which I more associate with suet feeders, but you can get them and put it on your hummingbird feeder. A squirrel cage is basically like chicken wire. It's usually not made of chicken wire, but it's made of metal. I'm not talking very well. It looks like looks like a screen, but the opening's big enough for hummingbirds to get in, but not squirrels. And since it's 4 or 5 inches away from where they can get the food, they can't reach the squirrels, but the hummingbirds can get in. That would be another thing I would try, but I would start with a squirrel guard, the classic kind, which is that half dome.
Yes.
If that doesn't work, I'd move my feeder. I'd move my feeder so that the squirrels have nothing to climb on.
I'm going to take a Zoom question right now. How long can a hummer stay in torpor?
I don't know the exact answer to that, and I suspect it's different with every species. But certainly we're talking in the vicinity of about 7 hours. 6 hours, 7 hours, maybe some can go 8 hours. It also depends upon the temperature, of course, which is why a lot of us had a lot of dead hummers in our yard this winter when it got so very, very cold, because though normally they could go all night, they couldn't go all night when it was as cold as it was. So I don't think there's an exact answer, but we're talking somewhere in the ballpark of 7 hours.
Okay. Is there a question? Yes.
If I were to put out some nesting materials like you mentioned, what would be a good way to do that? Like put them on the ground or stick them in a tree, like limbs and cotton?
Yeah,
So
I
a question
usually
about, can I just repeat it?
sorry.
If you have, if you want to put out nesting materials like lint and things like that, where do you put them? How do you go about putting them out into your yard to attract hummers?
I don't think they're very fussy. I've put them lots of places and it's worked. So one thing I do is I just find a kind of like a forked branch and just stick some in there. I've also put out bowls of fluff, near where I think they're going to be. You can literally put them on the ground, though that's probably the least ideal thing to do. I tend to drape things. So like lint, I'll kind of get a 3-inch piece of lint, make a 3-inch piece and just drape it over, like a twig. Up is better than down, but I don't think they're very fussy. I think if you do it, they'll be so grateful. You'll find they're using it. And if they don't, other birds will, by the way, too. So you're helping lots of birds when you do that.
Okay, so we have time for 2 more questions. There was one question back here first. Yes.
Is there a way to provide them with more warmth at the nighttime in these cold winters?
Is there a way to provide the hummer with more warmth during the cold winters during the night?
Boy. I mean, the answer is probably theoretically yes, but again, I've never heard of anybody doing this, and that's partly because you don't know where they're going to be. They don't roost in the same spot every night. And so, you could, like I said, theoretically put a heater out. I don't know. I mean, it's an open question. I don't know whether they're smart enough to find that heat source. So I'll see if I can find information about that. I'm sorry. Again, it's not something that I know of people doing, but I'll research it and try to get you an answer to that.
All right, and there was a question in the chat, but it looks like it's been answered about how to find heated feeders like during the winter months. So if you look at the chat, you'll see that there's information on that. One more question.
Oh, okay. So say yes, there are heaters for feeders, that those exist.
I was told to brush my golden retriever outside because birds like to use their hair.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, clean that's the same thing as like lint from a dryer, yes, that would be wonderful pet fur.
It's a good way to keep it out of the house.
Other
too.
birds will. Somebody will take it, whether it be the nuthatches, or whether it be chestnut-sided chickadees, something will take it.
All right, well, why don't we give Kim a wonderful round of applause?
Well, thank you. I hope it was useful. I hope it was what you needed.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation.